Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmad yasya yato nivayad itaratas charte suavigyaswarat tene brahma hridaya adikavaye muyanti surayaha tejo varimadam yata vinimayo yatra trisargo misha damna svena sada nirasta kuhatkam satyam param dimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, O Son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen in water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma projita kaitravocha paramo nirmatsaranam satam vedyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapa trayon mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni krite kimva purer ishvaraha sadyo hridi avarudyate tra kriti bihi susubis takshanat. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality, distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam muhur aho raskabu vibhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire to read Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore this fruit is even more tasteful, although its nectarine juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Grantaraj Ki Jai. So today we're going to hear a summary of the Bhagavad Gita in a nutshell. Bhagavad Gita is the quintessential text spoken by Krishna himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he was questioned by Arjuna, his sincere devotee, and Arjuna asked every question essential for clearing the path of self-realization and complete surrender to Krishna. So this is the most important text of Vedic literature. It's part of the Mahabharata. It is God speaking about himself and his pure devotee asking essential questions to clear the path of complete surrender. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita in a nutshell is in 15 different points. Point 1, Lord Krishna or Sri Krishna is the supreme absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the cause of all causes. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. So this is a verse spoken by Brahma in the beginning of time. And he says, Ishvara Parama Krishna. Krishna is the supreme absolute truth. Satchitananda Vigraha. He has a body made of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. And Satchitananda Vigraha. Anadir Adir Govinda. He's the original Supreme Personality. He is the original source of everything. And Sarvakarana Karanam, he is the cause of all causes. The definition of God is given in this aphorism from the Vedas. By him and from him is manifest this universe, and he controls its creation, sustenance, and annihilation. He or Krishna is the mainstay of both this unlimited variegated cosmic manifestation and the immeasurable spiritual sky, the Vaikunthas. He is the eternally existing transcendental supreme being with a spiritual form. The impersonal Brahman is but his bodily effulgence. He is the non-dual truth. The Supersoul, or Paramatma, is his plenary expansion, who resides in everyone's heart and pervades the entire creation as well. Point 1. Point 2. The jivas, or the living entities, are Lord Krishna's minute parts. Although the jiva is qualitatively non-different from the Lord, he is quantitatively different from him, since the Lord is infinite and the jiva is infinitesimal. The jiva, or the living entity, is situated in the Lord's marginal potency, which inconceivably is simultaneously one with and different from the Lord. So there's three fundamental potencies or energies of the Lord. There's the internal energy, the marginal energy, and the external energy. So the difference between the internal energy of the Lord and the external energy of the Lord, they're both spiritual, they're both eternal, but the external energy is sometimes manifest and sometimes not manifest, and therefore it's bewildering. The spiritual internal energy of the Lord is always manifest, although we may not see it right now due to being covered by ignorance. But once that ignorant shroud is taken away, we can begin to see the spiritual reality, even in this body. So the jivas are the Lord's minute parts. In other words, we are all part and parcel of Krishna. But it's impossible to be equal to Krishna or greater than Krishna. We are all subordinate to Krishna. That is our position. Point 3, the jivas, the marginal energy of the Lord. And why does it say the jiva is in the marginal energy of the Lord? Because the jiva can go either toward the external energy or the internal energy of the Lord. The internal energy is the spiritual world, where everything is eternal, blissful, full of cognizance or full of knowledge. And the external energy is temporarily manifest and temporarily unmanifest. And it is the opposite in every way of the spiritual energy, which is always manifest. The internal energy is full of misery. And it is there's always anxiety in the material energy. And there is birth, death, old age, and disease in the material energy. And there are three types of suffering: adhyatmika, adhibhotika, daivika, sufferings of this body and mind, sufferings caused by other persons, and sufferings caused by natural cataclysmic events. And everyone is subject to 5 types of ignorance. There's tamishra, under-tamishra, tamas, and moha and mahamoha. So these are 5 types of coverings of the living entity. What are those 5 types of coverings of ignorance? There, first of all, is, one second, number 1 is tamishra, that is identifying oneself as the body rather than identifying oneself as a soul. So that is a covering of ignorance, because our essential being is an eternal soul, part and parcel of Krishna. And so the first tamishra, or covering of ignorance, is to identify with the body. And the second, under tamishra, is considering material sense gratification one's standard of enjoyment. And due to that, there is anger and frustration that follows, because we can never satisfy all our material desires. And oftentimes, in the process of satisfying our desires, we become frustrated because there's no limit to the satisfaction that we want, material satisfaction, and therefore there's going to be anger and frustration. And then tamas, that is being in a state of anxiety all the time due to material identification. In other words, the soul is eternal. If we identify with the soul, we can never be killed. We can never be annihilated. But if we identify with the body is temporary. The body is subject to birth, old age, disease, and death. So therefore, from the moment of birth, there's anxiety about old age, disease, and death. And then number 4, we lament due to not being able to achieve our different desires. And this lamentation is a symptom of ignorance, because we're lamenting for something that we are not. And then number 5, thinking that there is nothing beyond death, thinking that death annihilates everything and we stop to exist. And that's actually ignorance. And then one should see everything as the energy of Krishna, and understand that we are part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, our real position is to surrender to the Lord and engage in devotional service, and by which we develop love for the Lord. And with development of love for the Lord, we become liberated eternally from the cycle of birth and death and the 5 coverings of ignorance. So, number 3, the jivas, or the living entities, are the marginal energy of the Lord, and they have the ability to reside either eternally, either in Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, or in this material world. The jiva falls down to material ignorance because of countless sinful activities. And in these alien surroundings, he goes up and down from the hellish planets to the middle planets like the earth, and to the heavenly planets like Swarga. But all these are material planets inside the material world, inside the realm of birth, death, and old age and disease. So whether one is in the heavenly planets in the material world, they're still subject to birth, death, old age, and disease, and the miseries of this body, miseries caused by other bodies, and miseries caused by natural cataclysmic events. Even though the duration of life in the heavenly planets is much longer, the sense gratification one can enjoy is more intense, but still it all comes to an end and one starts all over again, something like going up and down on a merry-go-round, on a Ferris wheel. So it's called the Ferris wheel syndrome. A jiva, or a living entity, falls down to material ignorance because of countless sinful activities. And in these alien surroundings, he goes up and down, traveling through all the planetary systems, from the Lord Brahma's planet down to Patala Loka. In the material world, the jiva experiences birth, disease, old age, and death, and is forced to accept 3 types of suffering, namely, those miseries stemming from his own mind and body, those inflicted by other living entities, and those hurled at him by the demigods. So point number 4. So this is the nutshell explanation of the Bhagavad Gita. Point number 4, the conditioned living entities are encaged in this many-faceted prison house called the material world. The nature of this world is creation, sustenance, and destruction. During creation and sustenance, this material world is in a manifest state, and with destruction, it again becomes unmanifest. Thus, the mundane, illusory realm is the Lord's inferior energy, because it is sometimes manifest and at other times unmanifest. And number 5, beyond this manifest and unmanifest external energy of the Lord, called the material world, exists another realm which is transcendental and spiritually variegated. This is the unlimited spiritual sky known as Vaikuntha, which is everlasting. This realm is always manifest. It is never unmanifest. Thus, it is not subject to creation and annihilation. So that's the spiritual world. Of course, if you study modern science, modern philosophy, and they'll say this is all a fantasy. It's not real. There's no such thing as an eternal world. There's only this material world in which we're living, and there's only matter, and there's no such thing as a soul also. Therefore, you only live once, and thus you should make the goal of life to have as much material pleasure as possible. So that is gross ignorance, and therefore people who go through such an educational system end up ruining their lives, being always in anxiety, being exploited, and always chasing after phantoms of happiness. But actually, every time they enjoy some type of happiness, also tragedy or some kind of problem follows. So therefore, they're always in a state of anxiety. Point number 6. Those conditioned souls who identify with the illusory material nature and with their temporary body and are proud of it, and who do not care to know about the Supreme Lord, are subjected by the Lord's illusory potency, which is known variously as Mahakali, Chandi, and Durga, and who pierces them with her trident of the threefold miseries. Those are the Adhyatmika, Adhibodhika, Adhidaivika that we discussed already. These demoniac jivas, or these errant souls, are forced into slavery by the illusory potency, Kali or Mahamaya. The Bhagavad Gita, which is the essence of all the Vedic scriptures, was compiled for the deliverance of the conditioned souls. By studying the Gita carefully, a jiva, or living entity, a human being, takes shelter of the Supreme Lord's lotus feet and attains liberation from the merry-go-round of repeated suffering in the material world. Point 7. These are 7 points of the Bhagavad Gita. The conditioned jiva, or living entity, suffers from the material disease, the threefold miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease. When this suffering becomes unbearable, he looks for relief. Those who are less intelligent embrace the path of impersonal liberation and undertake severe austerities to achieve their goal. More elevated than these salvationists are the devotees of the Lord, who realize that their eternal nature is to be the servants of the Lord. They do not try to extinguish this nature, but rather practice and preach the eternal process of devotion so they can enter the Lord's eternal spiritual abode. All living entities have a right to practice this eternal process of devotional service. So there are 2 major schools of philosophy in India. One is called the Impersonal Path, and the other is called the Personal Path. The Impersonal Path, one thinks that the material world is completely an illusion. It doesn't really exist. And therefore they reject everything in the material world, including Krishna, including Narayana, including existence of a spiritual world full of individuals and Vaikuntha or Goloka. And they think that the ultimate destination of the living being is an impersonal energy called the Brahma Jyoti, which is a type of light energy that is the source of heat and light, and sustains all living things. Just like the sunlight is a perverted reflection of the Brahma Jyoti, which is the spiritual light. So they think merging into that light is the ultimate destination, And to do that, they have to deny their own individuality, deny the entire material world, deny everything in the material world, including Krishna, to attain that impersonal liberation. Well, part of their theory is true. There is such a thing as called the Brahma Jyoti, but that is the spiritual effulgence emanating from the body of Krishna. And the Brahma Jyoti is made up of infinite number of jivas, or living entities, as pencils of light, or as sparks of light. That is their soul. But the soul is an individual. It's not simply light, heat, or energy. But the size of the soul is infinitesimally small. Therefore, when it's just like sparks of a fire. They're small compared to the fire. If they stay close to the fire, they stay lit. If they go far away from the fire, they're extinguished. So in that way, as long as the Brahman effulgence, made up of infinite jivas, emanates from the body of the Lord, and is given a chance, each one of those sparks is given a chance to choose whether they want to stay with the Lord and assume their eternal individual existence as servants of the Lord, or they want to try and pretend that they can exist independent of the Lord. If they want to be independent of the Lord, they come to the material world and they take different forms. There are 8,400,000 different species of life, 400,000 species of human beings. Most of them are uncivilized, and only a few of those species are civilized. And then there are aquatics, and there are insects, and there are mammals or animals. There are birds, and there's reptiles, and then there are plants, and of course there are human beings. So there's 8,400,000 different types of species that we can take birth as. But if we're fortunate enough to come to the human form of life, and eventually we do, because there is an evolutionary process in nature, but it's not evolution of bodies, it's evolution of consciousness. All the bodies are created at the beginning of creation, according to the Vedic philosophy. Just like there are all different types of cars that you can buy, depending on how much money you have. The cars are there, but then you can choose one model that you like, but you have to have enough money to buy it. So according to the purity of the living entities, they can get higher or lower bodies. So if we're contaminated with many material desires, we end up like dogs or cats, or even microbes or cockroaches, etc. But if we have piety, at least we can get a human form of life, and in the human form of life we have a chance to be liberated from the cycle of birth and death and go back to the spiritual world where we came from originally. So the seventh point says that the conditioned living entities suffer from the material disease, the threefold miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease. When this suffering becomes unbearable, one looks for relief. Those who are less intelligent embrace the path of impersonal liberation and undertake severe austerities to achieve their goal. More elevated than these salvationists are the devotees of the Lord, who realize that their eternal nature is to be his servants. They do not try to extinguish this nature, but rather practice and preach the eternal process of devotion so they can enter the Lord's eternal spiritual abode. All living entities have a right to practice this eternal process of devotional service. So the path of liberation is open for everyone. It doesn't matter, especially when you have the human body, it doesn't matter whether you're educated or not educated, whether you're rich or you're poor, whether you're beautiful or you're ugly. Everyone has a chance to attain perfection through the process of devotion to Krishna. Point 8. The Mahatattva, the material nature, manifests itself in 24 ingredients. that is, the unmanifest principle called the pradhana. 2, the false ego. 3, intelligence. 4, mind. 5, ether. 6, air. 7, fire. 8, water. 9, earth. 10, sound. 11, touch. 12, form. 13, taste. 14, smell. 15, ears. 16, skin. 17, eyes. 18, tongue. 19, nose. 20, stomach. 21, hands. 22, feet. 23, anus. 24, genitals. So these are the 24 elements that make up the body. The 25th element is the soul, the individual jiva soul, and the 26th element is the supersoul, or Krishna. Point number 9, the undifferentiated absolute truth, the original supreme personality, Lord Shri Krishna, incarnates in this material world once in every day of Lord Brahma. That is, once every 8,640,000,000 solar years, to shower his mercy upon both his surrendered devotees and the atheistic non-devotees. He protects his devotees and slays the atheistic demons, thus giving the latter troublesome release, so to speak, in the impersonal liberation. The Bhagavad Gita, on the other hand, teaches liberation through devotional service to the Supreme Lord. The only way to obtain this devotional service is to take full shelter of a spiritual authority or guru, who is coming in the line of a proper disciplic succession. Those who toil without worshiping the spiritual master will find that all their endeavors are futile. In other words, all their endeavors will not have success. Point 10, those foolish souls who refuse to take shelter of a bona fide guru are truly shelterless. Without the guidance of a guru, these rascals consider themselves knowledgeable, and on the basis of this misconception, they make the mistake of worshiping God as a man and a mere mortal, as God. Point 11. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is full in 6 opulences and is not the property of any particular sect, group, or country. He is available to everyone. He is the deliverer of all and the Supreme Father of all. He appears in this material world to liberate every living entity, and his message, the Bhagavad Gita, is therefore applicable to every land and to all people. It is meant to be preached everywhere. Therefore, those fortunate souls who are spreading the message of the Lord are the most dear to him. Point 12. Foolish, demoniac rascals in the grip of the Lord's illusory energy loudly brag about their materialistic plans. The Bhagavad Gita alone can penetrate their hard shell of ignorance and awaken them to the truth. Point 13. With concerted, strong preaching, the devotees of the Lord must inform such foolish men that their so-called plans will surely be undermined because the platform they have chosen to build their dream houses on is factually a mirage. A movie only. Reality is elsewhere. The information needed to transport one to that realm of reality and truth is available in the book called in the magazine called Back to Godhead, or the book called Bhagavad Gita. Point 14. Therefore, the real symptom of a true civilization is that its citizens are inspired by Bhagavad Gita to take up the process of devotion and go back to Godhead, where they will eternally reside in their actual home. Only in this way can they end all futile labor. Point 15. Just as the most sinful wretch lives in a ghostly body after death and moves about in the ether, having been denied a gross body, so the impersonalist, although rising to the point of liberation in the transcendental position, falls back down to the material world because of not having developed the mood of loving service to the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the severe austerities and penances the impersonalist performs are not equivalent to the eternal religion of devotional service. And last point, number 16, when monists are so attached to the formless, impersonal aspect of the Lord that they distinguish between him and his transcendental body, their consciousness becomes contaminated by this blasphemy, and thus they are deprived of a place in the Lord's eternal abode. But if by some good fortune they come in touch with a pure devotee and hear from him with faith about the Lord's transcendental name, qualities, pastimes, and so on, then they will certainly be cleansed of their contamination and become inspired and attracted by the Lord's glorious character, and finally they will surrender to him fully. Thus, the Bhagavad Gita is such an instructive text that for those who want to enter into the eternal pastimes of the Supreme Lord, its unequivocal message teaches the first stages of surrender, and this surrender is absolutely essential for reaching the ultimate destination. It is to be understood that the pure devotees have successfully passed this test of surrender according to the tenets of the principles of the Bhagavad Gita. So these are 16 points of the Bhagavad Gita in a nutshell. So, it explains who God is, who we are, the jivas or living entities, what is the material world, what is time, and what is our real duty in life. Everyone is trying to figure out who they are and what they should be doing in this lifetime. And because of the false education that they receive in schools, they think, I am this body, and my goal is to make money and have sense gratification, and therefore they ignore spiritual knowledge. They think it's all a fantasy or something made up to limit their sense gratification, and thus they waste their whole life chasing after the phantom of bodily enjoyment, and therefore they're always in anxiety. When you identify with something temporary, you're in anxiety. That's why you have to have insurance. Insurance for your car, insurance for your body, insurance for your house, insurance for the appliances in your house, insurance for cell phones and computers, insurance here, insurance there. Why? Because there's anxiety, because all these things are temporary, and it's very easy to lose them. They can be stolen, they can be used, they can fall into become non-functional because of some technical issue. And therefore, there's always anxiety when we identify with temporary things. And material sense enjoyment is also a temporary thing. Therefore, there's anxiety and frustration because we engage in sense gratification and it's pleasing, and all of a sudden, it's all over. And then we have to seek it again, and eventually we get frustrated. We can't get what we want all the time. And in that frustration, we also become angry and disillusioned. Sometimes we become self-destructive. And so many things happen in this world, all based on the desire for sense gratification, frustration because we cannot have all the gratification that we want, and it's not sustainable over time, and then anger, and then envy, and then disillusionment, confusion, and eventually we fall down into self-destructive behavior, and we die, and we take birth again and start all over the same process of suffering. So that is because we don't associate with genuine devotees. We don't want to hear the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita spoken truthfully. We want to be fooled all the time by false goals of being successful in the material world. Everyone is going to be a failure in the material world due to old age, disease, and death, where everything you have accumulated is going to be lost, and you can't take any of it with you when you die. Therefore, people pray to their God, whoever that may be, that there is nothing after death. But I'm sorry to say there is. And unless we understand that we are not this body, we have an eternal soul. But that soul will remain in ignorance as long as we avoid the association of genuine devotees, as long as we don't submit to hearing on a regular basis this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is meant to liberate us from the cycle of birth and death so that we can go back to where we came from, which is the spiritual world. As long as we refuse to do that, we continue to suffer with no means of alleviating that suffering and frustration and the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, and rebirth, death, old age, and disease. So to get out of this vicious cycle of samsara, the only way to do that is to regularly hear on a daily basis this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. So this was a nutshell in 16 points of the entire Bhagavad Gita. Now what remains is to actually hear it from the beginning to the end and assimilate all this transcendental knowledge by which we can become happy and peaceful and also be able to go back to Godhead where we came from. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you very much. And we'll stop there. Every morning at 6:30 we have a class on Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. All those classes are saved on YouTube. You can access them through our webpage, VedicCulturalCenter.org, or you can go to YouTube, VedicCulturalCenter.org, and hear this transcendental knowledge spoken without any addition or subtraction or speculation. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.